The phone was still warm when they found it. That is the detail that stayed with the first officer on the scene. Not the silence of the apartment, not the stillness of the body, not even the faint smell of something burnt near the kitchen bin. It was the phone, screen cracked at one corner, battery still at 42%, lying face down on the coffee table, like someone had set it there in a hurry, like someone had just finished using it. 3 days before she died, Lena Carter told her best friend she was being watched. And what police found inside that apartment made even the most seasoned investigators lower their voices when they talked about it. This is her story. Lena Carter was 24 years old. She lived alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a quiet part of town, the kind of neighborhood where people wave to each other from driveways and nobody locks their doors until after 10. She was the kind of person her neighbors described as steady. Not flashy, not loud, steady. She went to work, she came home. She ordered the same Thai takeout every Thursday. She kept a small cactus on her windowsill that she had named Gerald. She was, by every visible measure, unremarkable, and she liked it that way. She worked as a junior data assistant at a mid-sized regional firm. Nothing glamorous. She processed records, cross-referenced financial entries, maintained spreadsheets no one else wanted to touch. Her supervisor described her as meticulous. Her coworkers called her quiet. One of them said, almost as an afterthought, she noticed things other people didn't. That would turn out to be the most important sentence anyone said about her. For most of the year leading up to her death, Lena was fine, calm, routine. But somewhere around 6 weeks before everything ended, something shifted. Her friend Maya noticed it first. They met for coffee one Saturday morning, the way they always did, but Lena was different. She kept glancing at the door. She positioned herself with her back to the wall. At one point she reached across the table, lowered her voice and said, "Do you ever feel like someone's paying more attention to you than they should?" Maya laughed it off. What does that even mean? Lena didn't answer. She just stirred her coffee and looked out the window. It had started, as these things often do, with something small. Lena had been working late on a Tuesday, something she rarely did, when she stumbled across a folder she wasn't supposed to be in. She only landed there because of a mislabeled file path, the kind of clerical error that happens a dozen times a day in any office. But when she opened it, the contents didn't make sense. There were financial records attached to client accounts she didn't recognize. There were names she had seen before, linked to figures that had no corresponding invoices, no paper trail, no explanation. She almost closed the folder. She almost convinced herself it was nothing. Instead, she opened a second file, and then a third. By the time she finally left the office that night, it was past 11. She sat in her car in the parking garage for a long time before she drove home. She didn't tell anyone what she had found. Not yet. What she did instead was start a document, a private, password-protected file buried inside a folder she labeled Old Tax Stuff, and she began writing everything down. Dates, names, numbers, discrepancies. She was methodical about it, the way she was methodical about everything, one entry at a time. She kept digging. Over the next 2 weeks, the picture she assembled became harder to dismiss. The irregular records weren't errors. They were consistent, structured, deliberate. The transfers moved through accounts in a pattern, cycling in and out, always landing in the same 3 places. And the names attached to some of those accounts, Lena recognized them. Not from work, from somewhere else. Somewhere that made her stomach tighten when she connected the dots. She never reported what she found, not to her supervisor, not to anyone at the firm. When Maya asked her later why, Lena had said, "Because I didn't know yet who was in on it." She trusted no one. She told no one. She just kept documenting. And then the calls started. The first one came on a Wednesday night at 11:47 p.m. She let it ring. Unknown number. She assumed it was spam and went back to sleep, but it called again at 12:03, then again at 12:31. When she finally picked up on the fourth call, there was nothing, just breathing. Then the line went dead. She told herself it was a mistake, wrong number, some drunk person hitting redial. But the calls came back the next night and the night after that. Then she noticed the car. It was a dark sedan parked across the street from her building. She first saw it on a Thursday evening when she was taking out her rubbish. She didn't think anything of it, but it was there again on Friday and Saturday, always in the same spot, slightly off angle, facing her front entrance. One evening she stood at her window in the dark for 20 minutes watching it. The engine was off. She never saw anyone get out. The following Monday, she came home to find her laptop behaving strangely. Applications she hadn't opened were running in the background. 2 files from her personal desktop were missing, not moved, missing. She checked her email and found a login notification from a location she had never been to. Someone had accessed her account from a city 300 miles away. She called Maya that night, and this time she didn't speak in riddles. "Someone knows I've seen it," she said. "I don't know how, but they know." "Lena, you need to go to the police." There was a long pause on the line. "Not yet," Lena said. "I need more. If I go now, it disappears, all of it. I need to make sure it can't disappear." Maya told her she was scared. Lena said she was scared too. "But being scared doesn't mean I'm wrong," she said. That was 12 days before she died. In the final week of her life, Lena became a version of herself that the people who loved her almost didn't recognize. She stopped responding to messages for hours at a time. She canceled plans. She triple-checked her locks before bed. She moved her spare key from the planter outside her door to somewhere inside the apartment, somewhere no one else knew about. She bought a cheap secondary phone and used it to send a voice message to Maya. When Maya played it back later, sitting in a police interview room with her hands clasped in her lap, she said it was the most frightening thing she had ever heard. "If anything happens to me," Lena's voice said on the recording, "it wasn't random." 3 days later, she backed everything up onto a USB drive. She transferred her private document, the financial records, the names, the dates, the patterns she had mapped across weeks of late-night work. She put the drive somewhere safe. Then she took a piece of paper and wrote something down. No one knows exactly what, but detectives believe it was either a name or a location, and she folded it and put it in her jacket pocket. The night before she was found, a neighbor in the adjacent apartment heard voices through the shared wall. Not arguing, not raised, just quiet, low conversation, the kind that sounds almost normal if you aren't paying attention. The neighbor assumed Lena had a visitor. She thought nothing of it. She turned up her television and went to bed. In the morning, Lena Carter was dead. The officer who arrived first described the scene as wrong in a way he couldn't immediately explain. There was no forced entry, no overturned furniture, no signs of a struggle. Lena was lying on the floor near her bedroom door, positioned in a way that looked almost too deliberately like she had simply fallen. The apartment was clean, orderly even, almost staged. But certain things were missing. Her laptop had been wiped, not deleted, not formatted, but forensically scrubbed in a way that suggested someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The USB drive was gone. Her personal notebook was gone. The jacket she had been wearing the night before, the one she had folded neatly over the back of a chair, the paper from her pocket was missing too. What they did find, half burned in the small metal bin beside her kitchen counter, was a torn fragment of a note. Most of it was ash, but 4 words remained, just visible at the edge of the char. "They know everything." The cause of death was listed as undetermined pending toxicology. No external injuries, no signs of trauma. Whatever had happened in that apartment had been quiet and clean and careful. Detectives moved quickly. 3 names surfaced early. The first was Daniel Marsh, Lena's ex-boyfriend. They had dated briefly the year before, ended things without much drama. But in the weeks before her death, he had begun reaching out again. Text messages, a voicemail asking if she wanted to get dinner. He claimed when interviewed that he had nothing to do with her death, that he had not been near her apartment that night. His alibi placed him at a bar across town until closing time. Witnesses confirmed he had been there, but only until midnight. Lena's neighbor had heard voices sometime after that. The window was narrow, not wide enough to clear him, not narrow enough to convict him. The second name was a co-worker, a man named Robert Sell, who had worked in the same department as Lena for 3 years. Quiet, mid-40s, the kind of person who blended into the background of an office without anyone quite remembering his face. He quit his job 4 days after Lena's body was found. No notice, no explanation. He stopped answering his phone, stopped responding to messages, and when detectives went to his apartment, his neighbors said they hadn't seen him in over a week. He has not been publicly located since. The third name was the unknown caller. Phone records confirmed that the same untraceable number had called Lena's phone 19 times in the final 2 weeks of her life. That number, and this is the part that made investigators go quiet when they discussed it, called her phone again 8 hours after she was pronounced dead. Whoever held that number knew she was gone before it was publicly announced. The recovered data fragments told a partial story. Forensic analysts managed to reconstruct pieces of deleted files from Lena's cloud backup, echoes of the documents she had been building, enough to confirm that what she had found involved financial movements on a significant scale, linked to accounts belonging to individuals with considerable reach, enough to understand why someone would want it buried. But before the investigation could develop that thread further, the access pathway to the remaining data was flagged, then frozen, then reclassified under a legal hold that effectively put it out of reach. The official explanation was procedural, the timing was not. When Maya was finally allowed to speak about what Lena had told her in those last days, she said something that has stayed with everyone who heard it. She said Lena wasn't trying to be a hero. She wasn't trying to expose anyone. She was just someone who noticed something wrong and couldn't convince herself to look away. She used to say, "I just need a little more time," Maya said. Every time I told her to go to the police, to tell someone, she said she needed a little more time. And then time ran out. There were no arrests. The investigation officially remains open, though activity on the case has slowed to almost nothing. Robert Sell has not resurfaced. The unknown caller has never been identified. The USB drive has never been found. The fragment of the note, "They know everything," sits in an evidence bag somewhere. 4 words that answer nothing and ask everything. What Lena Carter found in that office on a late Tuesday night has never been fully established. The people who might know are either unreachable or unwilling to speak, and the only person who documented all of it, who built the picture piece by piece in the silence of her apartment, is gone. She left behind Gerald the cactus, still alive, still sitting on the windowsill. The question was never just who killed Lena Carter. The question is what she knew that made her worth silencing, and whether whatever she found is still out there, waiting for someone else to stumble across it. If this story stayed with you, hit like, leave a comment with your theory, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Cases like this one don't close on their own. Sometimes the only thing that keeps them alive is people who refuse to stop asking questions.